Hello folks, Richard Moore, and welcome to the Richard Moore Show. In the comments section, or in the detail section, if you will, of this video, I have the links to my blog on WordPress. I'm on most of the major platforms. I encourage you to share, subscribe, it's really important. And you can choose the notifications option there, and when I posted a new video, what have you, you'll be notified of that. I'm going to talk about an individual in Mississippi, and keep in mind when I'm speaking about unexplained deaths and how they're connected to the establishment, corrupt law enforcement, working with their network of paid volunteers that comes under the umbrella of community-oriented policing. Too many times we get the story, and more times than not, we get the story of whatever law enforcement or coroner, whatever the story is, that's what the press runs with. There's very little investigative journalism, and the story is it's just whatever story they want to tell, whatever is gonna, and so it's usually left at that. Very seldom does it go past what was reported the first time, and very seldom does the story change. But as we see daily, as things unfold in this nation, whether it be the Department of Justice making arrest, criminal charges against operators outside of this country, targeting people within this country with tracking them, spying, smear tactics, gossip campaigns, harassment, and attempted murder. Those are just a few of the things, and I have that release posted as well on YouTube. So I'm going to give you the story that you're not getting. Now, this job does not come with a paycheck, nor does it come with the sense of security that an American citizen should expect, due to the fact that millions, hundreds of millions of dollars are pumped into, through our judicial system, Department of Justice, community-oriented policing, millions of dollars in grant money, and the police departments and sheriff department, law enforcement, they're endowed with everything they need. But on the backside of that, we are not getting transparency. These individuals are left to their own devices. The politicians simply get the money, make sure the Department of Justice gets the money, and they leave that up to our chief law enforcement agency of the country. And surely they know what to do with it. Surely they can police themselves. Well, I'm here to tell you that is the problem, and I'm going to talk about that, and I'm going to speak on some things that I probably haven't articulated in the past, but I'm going to do it now. So whether I'm talking about North Mississippi or BB Town, Iowa, it doesn't matter. These stories transcend not only nationwide, but globally. Just as COVID-19 is a global pandemic, no one was protected from this, so goes community-oriented policing, and this mindset is called different things in different countries. But we know that there are groups of individuals, Bill Gates, for instance, that know what we need for this world more than we need. We know. And so, without getting into all that, I want to discuss some things, and I've got some things coming here in the next few days that I've been working on. I've been absolutely inundated with individuals coming forward and giving me their side of the story, giving me information you won't find in media reports. Today we're going to talk about, and I haven't done it due justice, and probably won't by the end of this, but just bear with me. One thing you know that when I bring a message, I kind of know when I start what I'm going to be talking about, and the rest of it I'm flying by the seat of my pants. Far from perfect, but I can assure you that you're going to get the truth, and you're going to get the unmitigated truth. And that's what I'm going to continue to do. And I'm going to continue to expose the exploiters. I'm going to continue to educate victims across this nation on avenues that they can take to be proactive in defending themselves, all the way up to representing themselves in federal court and taking these individuals that are responsible, those that have had crimes committed against them or against a loved one. Understand that you're dealing with statute of limitations. Now, even on wrongful death. Now, on criminal charges, a murder charge it's a high bar, but it doesn't enjoy protection of statute of limitations. And I believe there's some other serious crimes that fall in that, and maybe rape would fall in that line as well. But we do have a serious problem. When you hear individuals speaking of human trafficking, this is, in fact, what I'm speaking of. What is human trafficking? I don't know what you visualize, but I'm gonna try to lay it out one story at a time, one individual at a time. Because for the parents and for this mother, she hasn't had closure, and I would assume that she, like other mothers, is hearing or getting the feeling that those around her would just move past it, get over it. You know, you got to keep living. And I agree with that. But to tell, you're not in their shoes. To have a loved one taken from you unexpectedly, and the death be shrouded in a lot of questions that no lie can cover up. A parent knows their child more than the neighbors do. You know, you've got these long-tongued liars that love to, well, I heard this, and they'll talk all day about somebody they don't even know. And that is right in with law enforcement. Let's say they have a history with this individual. That tells me that they have a narrative, if they have a history, and they've got this person in this narrative, and it's quite possible the reason that a lot of these individuals have issues is because law enforcement is fixed on a narrative, and they have no intentions of changing that narrative, whether they're walking on water, raising the dead or not. They could care less. So I'm going to go through this and try my best to bring it all together in a short period of time and do it justice. Curtis Leon Jenkins. I've got to check. Curtis Leon Jenkins. And he lived on Pepper Mill Road in Madison County, Mississippi. And the story begins and this is from Curtis's mother, Beverly McGowan. And when I get the story from a mother, I know, and I want to, for those that can't understand, it's impossible to put yourself in a parent's shoes. No parent should ever outlive their child. No parent should have to bury their child, especially when they're snatched. They're snatched away, and they are written off as a nobody. And I've done several videos on individuals, many of whom I knew personally, that were nobodies, but they are somebody. So I'm gonna I want to make myself clear about that, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. Curtis was traveling late at night from Vicksburg to Madison. It was his 31st birthday. Now, about 3 in the morning, just as he was entering Madison County on I-55 North, his small Nissan pickup truck struck a guardrail. He was severely injured. He had recently separated from his wife, whose parents were big in the Southern Baptist Church, which, by the way, have just, and this is not a slight, again, if you're a Southern Baptist. I was raised a Southern Baptist, and I did get out of that, but I'm not, for other reasons. I am a born-again Christian. And some Baptists will tell you if you're not a Baptist, you're going straight to hell. That's one of the reasons. Curiously, the Baptist family's daughter-in-law had recently been killed in an automobile accident after she divorced their son. This is going somewhere. My other son asked Kurt what had happened, and Kurt said there was nothing in his mirror, but that something hit him from behind, causing his truck to swerve into the guardrail. The truck swerved into the guardrail. It ripped the driver door open and the seatbelt off the truck, at which point Kurt's hip and body hit the guardrail. He was in surgery for 9 hours. On his 31st birthday, the main surgery was to piece together his pelvis, which was broken in many places. After Kurt went home, his Baptist wife left him. He filed for divorce. Now, when we talk about the Kurt was driving, he heard something go bump, but he looked in his mirror and there was nothing behind him. We don't know what that sound was. Some of you may get back to me and maybe be able to articulate that mystery there. After she filed for divorce, Kurt began to notice weird things happening in his house, including being awakened by something at the same time every night. One afternoon, Kurt left for about an hour. When he came home, every light bulb had been stolen from his house in Madison. Also, both shower curtains and all the switch outlet covers had been stolen. One person could not have done this in an hour. And folks, before you jump on it, they don't make dope that good. Kurt was the type of person who kept a lot of things to himself. And that is true with a lot of us. When unexplained things start happening and we attempt to relay that to other people, and then you're immediately gaslighted and dismissed as having some type of psychosis, and it's intended to do that. There's individuals, and this program does this intentionally. They drive the psychological narrative and create this forced psychosis and keep an individual in this forced psychosis until their annihilation, and that's Latin to reduce something to nothing. Skipping ahead, on Monday, March the 13th, 1995, Kurt called my other son and asked if he could borrow some money for gas. My other son, who lived 15 minutes away, said sure. He would bring it over. They spoke a little longer, and Kurt said that he had retained an attorney, Matthew Moore, that day, the son of prominent State Attorney General Mike Moore. If you remember, he's the one that brought down big tobacco. And I've already talked about this, and I wanted to kind of do a do-over, and that's what we're doing today. And folks, Mike Moore got billions from the tobacco industry for the state of Mississippi. And to this day, that money is in a trust. The governor has no access to it. The people have no access to it. The legislator has got some type of secret lock on these funds. Nobody dare say much about it, and you won't see it on the news. And like I said before, I believe that they should, do the math, send everybody a check. Don't just sit on it. I can't imagine what the lie is. So my other son went to Kurt's house about 25 minutes after the phone call. Kurt was hanging from a yellow electric cord in the garage. He cut Kurt down, and then he cut the cord from Kurt's neck. Then called 911, who arrived in about 1 minute. They had to be nearby. Kurt would not have retained an attorney if he was suicidal. Plus, he made my other son repeat the attorney's name when he was on the phone. There are many other things I could mention, and I do have some of those other things that have been brought into light, and that's why we're back on here today. My son went to Matthew Moore's office a week after Kurt died. Matthew had Kurt's alligator skin briefcase, but would not say exactly why Kurt retained him. He said he needed to organize the file and come back in a few weeks, and he would then be able to give all the information. About a month after Kurt's death, Matthew Moore was shot in the head by a .25 caliber in the parking garage near his office. My other son read this in the Clarion Ledger newspaper, and he went to Moore's office to get Kurt's file and briefcase. The legal secretary said there was no file for Kurt, nor was there a briefcase. Now, I want to take you to a little bit more information that absolutely brings new light to what we're talking about right now. Okay. Understand that Kurt has a brother and a mother. Both claim that they are targeted individuals, and I have no reason to doubt that. One account from his brother, he said, I do remember one thing that happened in the fall of 1994. My brother was by himself gambling at a casino in Vicksburg. Back then, they used to send the waitresses, my hostess, around to the tables quite often to bring drinks. After several hours, if it was in 94, I'm going to say that was either Isle of Capri or Lady Luck. Somebody let me know. It's one of the two. After several hours of gambling, my brother was out of money and slightly drunk, so he goes to his vehicle in the multi-level parking lot of the same casino. This was and is private property. Anyway, he felt that he was too inebriated to safely drive. So Kurt put his keys on the dash and crawled in the back seat to sleep for a few hours. Now, anyone that's been to a casino, they know the deal with alcohol. And if they don't give you a room, you get a room. They're not having a problem with you sleeping in the parking lot. Okay? That's part of the deal. He fell asleep in the back seat and was awakened by a crash as a vehicle ran at the rear of his parked car. How many people can relate to that? Getting hit in a parking lot. I can. Every time it was set up, every time it was all theater. They operate off zero rules. They circumvent the law, due process. They hate the Constitution. They work for law enforcement. And when you call law enforcement, and I'll quote Tanner Vaughn, working for the sheriff of Union County, Mississippi, we can break in, we can steal, we can rob, and when you call the sheriff, when you call the sheriff's department, they're not going to do anything. Attempted murder, all of it documented, with physical evidence, with an eyewitness, video, everything in hand in Union County, Mississippi. They've done nothing because he was here for a murder for hire for the sheriff. That's the story. He got out of the back door of the car to see what had happened. A black woman got out and apologized for hitting Kirk's car. Kurt assessed the damage and told the woman not to worry about it. She had a bag-type cell phone. We remember the bag phones. That's what people were using back then when cell phones were first being used in Mississippi in 94. And they're still behind the curve. My brother told her again not to worry about it, but she insisted that she call the police. Private property. She even walked over to the exterior wall of the garage to find an open space so she'd get a signal. She called the police, who came up to the casino garage within a couple of minutes. I tell you what, when you hear this story, you think, well, they've got some of the fastest police. They do, unless one of their deplorables, and you're in the middle of being victimized and robbed, raped, or anything, assaulted, then I'm telling you, you'll die of old age waiting for them. But when it is a ruse and it is all set up, they've got all the players on deck waiting for this theater to play out, this criminal, illegal theater. Immediately demanded that Kurt do a sobriety test or a breath test. That's the point in the game where the cop would have got his feelings hurt. Of course, they still beat and kill people in Mississippi while they're handcuffed. And it's reported they died of natural causes or they was on dope. That's all you have to say in Mississippi. Oh my God, that's awful. You know they was on that dope. Oh, okay. I see now. And we'll cover that later. My brother protested because he was not driving. Now all this works if he is is not on private property, okay? So let's not get this confused. If he was on in a public area or whatever, but he's on private property. In that argument, this is a casino, and often it would have been different. He'd have been parked at the parking lot of Macy's versus the casino. Okay. Macy's is not getting people juiced up and spinning them around and playing mind games and financially raping them as much. He protested because he was not driving and was on private property and didn't do anything to cause the accident. They arrested Kurt there in the city of Vicksburg. And that was the last stand of the South, folks. They put him in the tank without even checking for weapons. Kurt had a small Swiss Army knife, and he promptly cut his wrist in order to force the cops to transfer him to a hospital. Now, taken in the right context, ladies and gentlemen, you're a victim. This is not the first time, and we don't know how long. Possibly this could have been a lifelong pattern of violations on him by law enforcement and their deplorable stooges that work with them. So we don't know, but I do know, based on what I've learned about this story, that this wasn't new to him. He knew Obviously, they're not going to get me a phone call. Obviously, all the laws and rules are thrown out the book. And folks, this is the fundamental foundation of policing in America is lies. You take lying out of it and perjury, there's not much left. That's a fact. Those are national statistics, not Richard Moore's. So I'm just giving you the message. So when extreme things happen, then in order for a person to stay in the game and be able to survive in these satanic games of extremes, then you must do extreme things in order to survive. And I am convinced that's exactly what Kurt did at this moment. So he cut his wrist in order for the cops to transfer him to a hospital. An ambulance transported Kurt to a hospital. His cut was stitched. And a cop at the hospital gave Kurt a ticket with a court date. Kurt got a cab back to the casino and got in his car and drove back to Madison, Mississippi. He goes on to say about 4 years after Kurt's death, Kurt's father, who drank a lot, was actually arrested in Vicksburg for a DUI. And he was actually guilty. He said, my father, who was a 33-degree Mason, I believe that's a Master Mason, Freemason, said the cop who was administering the breathalyzer at the jail was wearing a Masonic ring. Oh, how I know that story. I exercise my First Amendment right by publicly blasting a CBA, a community-based agent working for the Mississippi Highway Patrol. I caught on my property stalking with a group of people. I get arrested for cyber stalking. They have no scruples, no morals, zero merit, but they will abuse you through the judicial system. You've got to be traumatized, tortured in the jail, and pay money for a bondsman, all of these things, and go through this psychological, irreparable harm caused by those in a position of trust. This is law enforcement in America today, not just Mississippi. Don't make no mistake about it. You see these cop shenanigans on national media, California, maybe in larger cities and so forth. You won't hardly see that stuff in the South. Why? Don't assume it's not going on. Nobody have the balls to report the truth. That's the only reason. And if they did, then that's all that would be on the news. Got that cleared up. So the cop was wearing a Masonic ring. I remember with this cop, that investigator was telling me that I was committed a crime. I said, I put the man on blast. It was unflattering free speech. He shouldn't have been on my page reading it if he's offended by it. And furthermore, I'm just saying, if I got caught red-handed, creeping and stalking and looking in somebody's window trying to catch them with their clothes off, I'd be scared too. But there were no threats made. And as I'm talking, he's twirling a ring. I look, when you're twirling that ring like that, I mean, it catches your eye. And I look, and it, of course, a Masonic ring. And then I think back, nearly 20 years ago, when I was set up in Amory, Mississippi, with the Amory Police Department, a crooked lawyer, Jeff Navarro, a crooked deputy, Curtis Knight, dead now. He didn't apologize. He never. And folks, I'm telling you, it's a sad note. You leave this world, and you go to your grave knowing that you never reconciled with those individuals that it's destroyed their lives. They'll never be able to get back that lost time. The weddings, the funerals, all these things that they missed. You have reduced individuals to something less than a functional human. You've stripped them of their dignity. You've stripped them of their rights to vote. And when you're in narrow-minded, moronic communities, crowded with fake churches, preaching a new message, they no longer. I've been where I am for 5 years. Not one time. I've had everything, and nothing's done. I make the reports, I document, I've got cameras, all that stuff. Not one time has a person invited me to church. Whatever happened to the Great Commission? Well, that's just a fairy tale, I imagine. It says a lot about those people. The church, by the way, is not a building. It's not bricks and mortar. Jesus said, "Where two or more gathered in my name, there I should be in the midst of them." Anything about being a member at the first church, the Chosen Frozen, down there in downtown Tupelo or anywhere else. So the officer doing the breathalyzer was twisting his ring. Now, he says, my father spoke some inconspicuous code words, like a question about whether the police station faced east. The cop angrily told my father to stop talking, but directed my father to the far end of the bench so the test would be last. When everyone else finished their test, the Mason cop, everywhere boys, told my father to just come sit there. After 2 hours, the Mason cop did my father's test, and he was under the limit. So the cop told another cop to take my father back to his car and release him. So his father bragged about this benefit of being a Freemason. That is alarming. And this brother went on to talk about some things that I'm going to throw in here since I'm on it. We know that in East Germany, the Stasi, and this COINTELPRO program that's was banned by Congress, is simply a rebranding. It's an old whore in a new dress. They use citizens and informants in East Germany to destroy the lives of targets. It's also true that 1/6 of East German civilian population were active participants. After George W. Bush pushed through the Patriot Act, it was decided that the federal government needed 100 million citizen participants in law enforcement. So the United States has about 1/3 of its citizens wrapped up in this. As a percentage, this is twice the number of that the Stasi had. Also note, there was never a Truth and Reconciliation Commission to hold the Stasi and their helpers responsible for the hell they inflicted on others. I've got something to add to that. During COVID-19, I'm wrapping it up, they went to a huge recruitment drive. Who else there be how else could there be a shortage of workers after the biggest killer of the economy? I've been saying this, folks, in over 80 years. Over 1/3 of restaurants in America are closed permanently as a result of the pandemic. And that's one example, and we're all familiar with this nationwide. About 30 million Americans actually are government employees. He continues. Plus, you've got about 100 million of the aforementioned citizens. So that forecloses a lot of the possibilities of reconciliation. What stimulus, he says, do you suppose would turn the network off of stalking? What would compel them to offer compensation for the irrevocable crimes they have perpetrated? Could they repay the cost of having created the monstrosity of flaming shit? Nothing could make these evil people become willing to pay for their wrongdoings. And they cannot pay to make things right. And he goes on to say what they could pay. And I'll leave that to the listener. When we talk about crimes, we look at the Nuremberg trials. the first round, the second round, and those officers and foot soldiers that said, well, I was just doing my job, they met the same fate as those in the first round. But when he's speaking of the citizen soldier and so forth with Stasi, it does make you wonder. We look, and I've been saying, well, you can't find workers, but these businesses are closed. They're not giving pandemic relief anymore. What are these people doing? Because it seems like there's no shortage with stalking, creeping morons, color coding, noise harassment, lying, creeping around your property, and they're doing this in plain sight. Unless you're the victim, you're not going to be a keyed in to what's really going on. You're going about life as normal, and traffic's traffic, and this, that. You're not paying attention to it. Oh, but I'm telling you what, the victim is paying attention to it. The victim has no choice but to pay attention to it. Just like Curtis Jenkins. Now, Curtis Jenkins, from what I gather, he retained this attorney, Matthew Moore, the son of Mike Moore. Those people are from Hulka, Mississippi. If you look at the killing fields of Rose Hill, which is ground zero, and when I speak of the killing fields of Rose Hill, I'm talking about unexplained deaths. And folks, it's coming in like a flood, and it's overwhelming. This is simply a place marker that so much leads to that area in North Mississippi. And if it's only symbolic in nature, as you walk with me through the stories that I tell, the killing fields of Rose Hill, you are going to see an evolving picture that is not pretty. It's going to give you a different position, a different angle at how you have been perceiving and seeing things. I've known for far too long that the casino industry as a whole play an integral part in community-oriented policing, the COPS program, also known as gang stalking. They gave us that word. I'm not particularly fond of it. I do have other words I'd rather lean on, and as criminal tyrants. Pasco County, Florida, won civil lawsuit by the Justice Institute because the sheriff is using predictive policing, funded by the same people that are funding these people here. It all comes from the same till. And they're systematically punishing an entire family, arresting and harassing and stalking for crimes they have yet to commit. The sheriff, Chris Nicola, stands firm on his position, while deputies say the only way out here the sheriff told us to. And so that's, if you're wondering, I don't know who it is. We'll start with the chief, the fire chief, the police chief, and the sheriff. That's who it is. Their phone number is 911. So we'll take the mystery out of it. Victims, you document. Your story is important. Since the federal lawsuit that's still being litigated, I have a copy of it here. I've read through it, and I'm gonna tell you, folks, it is. You read it, and you'll be ready to chew up a bucket of 10-penny nails. I'm telling you. Now, the Justice Department has them under investigation, a criminal investigation for misuse of federal funds, and I'm telling you, that broom sweep does not stop in Pasco County, Florida. You can believe that. I hope to God the next step they make is in Lee County, Florida. But they've got a tyrant running that deal down there in the Sheriff Department of Lee County, Florida. And just don't get it confused. We'll mirror that in Lee County, Mississippi. And we got more on that, folks. Lee County and the former sheriff, Harold Ray Presley. Yes, it was Elvis. They're all family. And there's a story there because Harold Ray Presley being murdered, his son sent to prison, and they said it was suicide. We know it was murder. But, of course, the press and the sheriff that's in there now are his hands clean. What did Curtis Jenkins have to say about these casinos? Well, I can double down on whatever Curtis Jenkins was saying. I've reported flagrant, abnormal things in casinos to the Gaming Commission. And you know what they do? They back the casinos play. That's how you confirm who's doing what. All of these regulations and these boards and these people in positions of trust are beholden to one thing, and that is the dollar. And if you're doing something to kick against that, you're in trouble. Curtis obviously was saying too much. His death was made to look like a suicide. At 16 years old, my brother, 18, died in a Muscle Shoals City jail cell. It was not a suicide, and we're not in denial. We could be talking about Jeremy Williams in Oklahoma 2 years ago. Accidental overdose. Baloney. I could keep naming them all, folks. Kayla Prestridge, Amory, Mississippi, jumped from a moving car, 25 years old. But yet her abusive boyfriend and snitch for the police had a long history of abusing her, and her body's presented the evidence that the coroner said was only indicative to being pushed or forced physically from the vehicle. And it wasn't the impact in the road, all the things they say that what the press reported and what the coroner's saying are two different things. Then a year ago, or less than a year ago, I hadn't got into that yet, a couple, elderly couple, was robbed, murdered, the lady raped, murdered, right there in Amory. And word has it on the street that this Jonathan Thompson was involved in that as well. But never been arrested. I don't know who he is. They say he's a snitch. What if he's a snitch? It's maybe like this. Well, okay, go ahead and arrest me. I've got things to tell too. They can't afford that. They can't afford him to be talking. So what do? Protect the lie. But we're working on it. We're investigating it. And as time grinds on, the trail gets colder and people forget and they move on. Just get over it and move on. Well, you know what? Some people are not going to move on. If it was your child, would you move on? If it was your brother or sister, would you advise others, just move on, forget about it? The reason we're having this problem today, ladies and gentlemen, is because too many people have moved on. And they have settled for defeat. They have sat down at the table of the enemy. They've negotiated with the enemy. But there's those that will not negotiate with the enemy. And I'm one of them. And I know a lot more of them. As a matter of fact, I hold and claim every promise that God has given me in that book. And He's true to His word. And for that, I will not negotiate with the enemy. And negotiate with the enemy is for me to shut up and sit down and let it go. We want answers. Those in the position of power that are investigating this, gone are the days of you sitting on your laurels and giving a story because you're afraid that it may implicate other people. Let it be what it's going to be. We are a country of laws and order, or we're supposed to be. I still believe that the Constitution is intact. Maybe it didn't, but they're going to have to prove me wrong. I'm going to have a federal judge to tell me that somehow, some way, I inadvertently surrendered my constitutional rights. I didn't. I've never had it, nothing, but for some reason, when I'm denied life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and I'm speaking for millions of Americans that do not know the meaning of equal protection. That's the better conversation. And I don't want to be insensitive here, but I'm sure everybody that can hear me, that's watching me, can understand. We've got problems in Ukraine. There's problems all over the world. The United States, contrary to popular belief, we're not the Boy Scouts of the world, and we can't. There's other countries that are closer. Y'all worry about it. We've got our own problems right here. We've got somebody in the White House, and I don't think they know they're in the White House. We're buying our gas from Russia, or was. They've turned the. I mean, it's absolute. It's worse than a three-ring circus. So people want to clap. Man, just pray for the people in Ukraine. Nothing wrong with that. Pray for them. And while you're on it, pray for your neighbor. Because right here, in the good old U.S. of A., Americans, your fellow citizen has been demonized, marginalized, and compartmentalized as being something that they don't want. And so we are living in a genocidal era in the United States. Curtis Jenkins is a victim of that. His brother, he got hard target is up on his email address. His mother, and when I hear from them, and I feel what's coming from them, and folks, I'm telling you, it's not pretty. I deal with people that are hurt, jaded is an understatement, and they have a chip on their shoulder, and rightfully so, because the country that they were taught about in school were made to believe is not the country they're living in. They've been written a bad check. And I think it's high time that we start doing everything possible to make this country good on those promissory notes. Because that is our inalienable right, and it's being denied. And we do this, and I'm not going to let and move on and let another Curtis Jenkins slip by. It was so big and important that his death was made to look as a suicide. He obviously was being harassed by law enforcement with the arrest and so forth. So he wasn't a Mason. That didn't help him any. And even with a well-known attorney, Matthew Moore, and he is assassinated, it's just, and now we don't know what was in the briefcase. What was in the briefcase. Wouldn't you think that that'd be national news? Wouldn't you think they'd be investigating the casino people with all the money? Nope. This is the first news broadcast you're getting on it. Taking a long time, but we're going to keep it up. Let me hear from you. I'm totally supported by our listeners and followers, and I'll have the instructions in there if you choose, and you can also become a Patreon. Until next time, let me hear from you. Share, subscribe, and like. God bless you.